Titus. We're going to be in Titus chapter 1, verses 10 through 11. And I want to give a little precursor to what we're going to be talking about. Basically, we're going to see a specific group of people being talked about by Paul. We can probably relate to this group more than we realize, and we're also going to discover whether or not we want to be a part of this group. Is this group of people someone that we should be proud that we can relate to, or should we be ashamed that we can relate to this particular group? So with that, let's find out. Let's jump in verse 10. For there are many insubordinate, both idle talkers and deceivers, especially those of the circumcision, whose mouths must be stopped, who subvert whole households, teaching things which they ought not for the sake of dishonest gain. So it seems in this particular place, this would be Crete that Paul is writing to Titus. Titus is in Crete. There's a lot of people teaching false doctrine, and he specifically says, especially those of the circumcision. And so what does Paul mean by that? Who is he talking about? Well, back in the day, you were either circumcised or not, but basically this was a sign of whether or not you were a Jew or you were a Greek/Gentile. So what Paul is saying here is that particularly Jewish Christians were speaking lots of false doctrine. We might think of this as the most religious people, right? The religious elite almost, if you want to think of it that way. People who are very religious. And who does that sound like? What does that sound like? Sometimes that's probably you and me, right? To make this a little more personal and kind of get to what I'm aiming at here, I'll use Paul's words to describe this, and then I'll change a little something at the end. For there are many insubordinate, both idle talkers and deceivers, especially those at men's Bible study. For there are many insubordinate, both idle talkers and deceivers, especially those at women's Bible study. And I'll make this personal for myself to kind of get to the point I'm trying to make. For there are many insubordinate, both idle talkers and deceivers, especially those on the worship team. So we could find ourselves that Paul is talking about us in the religious group that we associate with if we're not careful. When we're so focused on our outward Christian appearance, so eager to be seen serving. A great example would be maybe so ready to counsel someone else, but you rarely ever receive counsel yourself. You're always giving everyone else the advice because you know best. The people who seem religious, they're part of that in crowd, the religious clique. Kind of a Christian term would be the holy huddle, if you've ever heard that. And Paul says that we can do this for the sake of dishonest gain. But what is it that we gain from being in this group? Well, our pride. Our pride swells. We look good on the outside. We sound good on the outside. We act good on the outside. And all of this is simply to build our pride. But Paul says there's a cost. He says that these people subvert whole households. A synonym for subvert could be destabilize or to overthrow. So you're destabilizing or overthrowing a household. To make this even a little more generic, your marriage is going to be subverted. Your family could be subverted. Your friendships are going to be subverted. You're going to lose the relationships around you, all for the sake of growing your own pride. And today it's my heart that you would leave this group if you find yourself in it. We don't want to be a part of this group. I even had to check my heart and my own motives as I read through this, even being personally convicted in certain areas. Am I just a part of a holy huddle, that religious group of people? And Titus was actually sent by Paul specifically to Crete to root out these people. He talks about that in the earlier parts of this chapter. And he speaks of what true elders/teachers should look like. We can almost see that as a comparison to everyone that's in this group and what they're not. Right? They're the complete opposite of what they should be. And so nothing good comes from being a part of this religious group, these people that teach all of this false doctrine. And I want to challenge you to check your heart today, to repent of whatever pride that you come into contact with in that time with the Lord where you're checking your heart. Paul wants us to be better, and he speaks of that in the previous verses. And we see that the cost for being one of these people, a deceitful person who's in it for dishonest gain. That's the only reason that they're doing these things, this religious thing. The cost simply isn't worth it. It's not worth it to lose the relationships around us, to be swallowed up by our own pride. So that's my heart for you. I challenge you to check yourself if you're in that religious group, and if you are, to repent of that sin and walk in freedom. It's a pleasure being with you guys this morning. I pray that you guys were